Welcome back to the Real Wealth Solutions Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Greg Scully. To my upper left, actually next to me on the screen, we have a co-host, Darren Light. And today's guest is Bill Ham, author of Creative Cash, the complete guide to master lease options and seller financing for investing in real estate. Bill is also owner-operator of Phoenix Residential Group, where he has created a portfolio of over 1,000 units, 400 of which were through creative financing, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
With 15 years experience in the industry, Bill has learned creative financing techniques and teaches future real estate investors the art of buy right, manage right, and finance right. Welcome to the show, Bill. How did I do reading that?
That was perfect. You read that very well. That's a very good canned intro that we sent.
Nah, that's fine, but it's great. It's inclusive.
Yeah.
Do you want to round that out with anything?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've been in the business about 15 years now. Started off, I was a commercial pilot by trade. My very first deal was a duplex. Kind of walked away from aviation with very little experience or money or anything. I had closed one duplex and saved up a little bit of money and just kind of threw the keys at the boss and walked out, for better or for worse, and survived it. And my first 400 units, as you said, were all done with some form of creative financing. Basically, I did not walk into a lender, a traditional lender's office, sit down, put down some money, qualify for a loan, purchase real estate. That took me several hundred units before I actually started doing that, largely because I had no money, no credibility, no experience. So I got out on the street and just learned the art of deal making and problem solving. And so now this book that I've written, Creative Cash, is that journey, and based on all the information that I learned out there, the tricks and techniques that I used to build that portfolio, now in a book.
So what's the basic structure of the book? Is it strategies with stories, or and then maybe who is it tied to? Because you started with a duplex. Obviously, there's people trying to take down, hundreds of units at the same time.
Absolutely.
Is there an avatar of sorts?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So yes, the book is in a step-by-step format. A few anecdotal stories here and there, but largely it is just strictly information. And it's like I always tell everybody, I'm not motivation, I'm information. I'm not here to convince you should be in the real estate business. I don't honestly care whether you are or you aren't. But if you are, this is a great place to get some extra information, learn some new techniques. So it's set for someone with a beginner novice level, all the way up to someone who may have a large portfolio, could use some of these techniques and add to their strategies of purchasing. Sort of what the crux of it basically is how to solve problems in real estate. How to analyze the deal, how to look at the situation, how to look at the seller, how to look at a piece of real estate and say, okay, what's going on? What's the problem? And then to create value by the negotiation process and the offer process. So if Greg, you're the seller, you've got some kind of issue, I'm going to sit down, figure out what motivates you, what motivates me, what's our situation here, how can I solve your problems? How is my offer going to be of value creation to you? And that's the book. That's the art of the book, is teaching you how to go out and find deals and look at things in a different light. As I can tell people, if the deal doesn't work, usually you kind of throw it in the trash, and I'm saying, hey, hold on one second. If the deal doesn't work, let's pull it back out, use a few of these techniques. If it still doesn't work, okay, then put it back in the trash. Creative financing just increases probability. If you're closing one out of X amount of deals that you find because that's a good deal to you, then I'm saying here are a few techniques that can just widen that spread a little. That's all. I don't want people going out and thinking that creative financing is the only way or the way, and you're only going to try and do lease options or seller financing. That's a mistake. I want you thinking that.
Yeah, because like in my own personal quiver, this one's lacking, and it's been something that I've been getting more intentional about learning about, because usually it's just different scenarios based on different kinds of more conventional financing, but rarely do I plug in the wild card of the creative financing. Right. Maybe because it's hard to really define. It's not just simply you get another version of term sheets, and then like the timing of the market right now is like you 15 years, you've seen a few cycles. 2008, the crisis, there was deals, no lending. Now there's plenty of lending and kind of no deals, in the sense that they're very hard to make pencil. So is there something particular that you're seeing now where
Yes.
this is like, hey man, you need this in your toolkit?
Absolutely. And so I'm big student of market cycles. And I know Darren's heard me speak on that subject a lot. And I teach in the book as well what I call the 3 pillars of real estate. And to broadly answer your question, sort of as why now, what we have to understand is market cycles, and that the market rises and falls and rises and falls. That means lots of different things. It rises and falls as far as pricing is concerned, operations are concerned, and one of the biggies as far as debt is concerned. And debt has market cycles right along with the rest of the economy. So the key is to kind of pay attention to where we've been and know that where we've been is not necessarily where we're going. And so you can kind of look back to predict forward. And so I know the market cycles, as you pointed out, I've been through them all. And so what I know is that we're at the peak and kind of going over the top of a market cycle, generally speaking, nationally speaking, and lenders are starting to retreat. We're seeing Freddie and Fannie, you got to put up a year's worth of principal, interest, tax, and insurance right now. That's not because they're incredibly confident about the future, obviously. So there's that, and we're seeing a tightening up of criteria. Lender, you need to see more experience, more of a resume, things like that. So what I'm seeing, and this is indicative of all the market cycles, and you go over the top, lenders cause it. Lenders look forward and say, oh, I think we're going to go into recession. So lenders pull back and therefore cause a recession. And so I think we're going to go right back into the market cycle you mentioned a second ago, in the 08 market cycle, where there's going to be plenty of deals and a lot less lending to take on those deals. Therefore, creative financing is going to be very prevalent over the next 2 or 3 years, whereas it has not been that prevalent over the last 5 years.
And then what about scale is the kind of my next canned question I had going into this. I could see in the smaller unit counts, maybe mom and pop owners, that these strategies can really be problem solvers, because you tend to be working more with individuals and they're like, hey, I don't want to take the capital gains hit, and you can figure out and work with them more directly. Larger scale stuff where you have more sophisticated sellers, are there still creative strategies? They just look different. Is the pot, is the bucket smaller? Can you talk to that span a little bit?
Absolutely. So the techniques work across all asset classes. I have done everything in my book from houses up to several hundred unit apartment complexes. So all the techniques work. It's really functionally about finding a seller. It's about, and I talk about what I call a SPY technique, and it stands for seller, property, you. And that's the order in which we want to kind of analyze deals. It's really looking at the seller first. What motivates the seller? And then let's look at the property. So when we're talking about, mom and pop sellers or larger institutional sellers, it's really not a function of the asset size as much as the person or the group. Do they have a problem? So if you've got a property that's a large property, then it probably has a large problem. So yes, you can still use creative financing. Now, what I find in the smaller asset class, and I'm saying smaller, probably 10 units to maybe 50 units, several things. Yeah, it's a lot easier to get directly in touch with the owner. So it is a little bit easier in that negotiation process. You might not be dealing with a realtor, although I love working with realtors, and I can show you exactly how to use creative financing with a realtor. But more to your question, what we call mom and pop or smaller asset class, I think there's going to be more deals done in that space than in the large space over the next several years. Therefore, if deal volume lies within that sector, yes, I think we're going to see more creative financing in the 10 unit to 50 unit space, 60 unit space. But the main reason I think we're going to see that is I think that's the real estate food group that's going to get hit the hardest in the next downturn. I think that space is going to generate the largest amount of problems. Those sellers are going to have the largest amount of problems, and therefore you're going to be able to solve the majority of the problems within the, I'm going to say, CC assets ranging from 10 to 50 units. That's going to be the softest spot of the market over the next 5 years, my prediction.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts on that too, and I think some of it just might be like COVID fatigue type thing that
See that?
as people, we're going to speak in generalities a lot because that's kind of what we do, but generally people are going through COVID pretty well. But it's added a whole nother layer of complexity to it. And so being a mom and pop owner now with the pandemic on top of that, having to be a part-time lawyer about eviction moratoriums and everything like that, it's just piles on, more complexity than maybe I think people wanted to take on. And a sale might be like, hey, let's go ahead and retire because this is getting old. It's not as easy as it was when we were just rising with the tide. So,
Yep, you completely just read aloud my prediction on the
oh,
next on that. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, what I'm seeing in we're seeing it occur more in the northern states first. What we would call your more landlord-friendly states, New York, Pennsylvania, places like that. But I'm predicting some of that leniency towards tenants or the left-leaning, and this is not a political comment, left or right, I don't personally care, but I am going to say left-leaning, meaning more towards the liberal. I believe future tenant law is going to favor tenants more than landlords going forward. Now, is that going to be a clean sweep across the nation? No, clearly not. But we see up north, it's very landlord or tenant friendly. I think we're going to see a lot more legislation in all states going in that direction. What that's going to do is it's going to make that mid-size operator struggle with the new legislation and struggle with management. If you're a 200 unit complex and you've got professional management, they've got systems for that. It's easy. You own 20 units and you got to go down to court for the tenant, and then the tenant does this and the tenant does that, and then they get an appeal, and then you got to go back to court. Now you're taking time off from work and your kids were all of a sudden you go, whoa, this 20 unit complex was just supposed to be this retirement thing. And now I'm on this treadmill of dealing with tenants. And by the way, it was an older building. And now we've got some CapEx problems and the tenants are a problem. And here comes the city. I don't as a mom and pop owner, I don't have the systems to manage this level of real estate going forward. I need out of here. That's where we're going to see a lot of sale opportunity. My prediction again, going forward in the next 3 to 5 years, because I think the management of those smaller assets is going to get a lot more difficult for unsophisticated, and I say unsophisticated, not intelligent wise, but system wise, unsophisticated property management mom and pop that are not well systemized. I think are going to struggle dealing with new laws coming forward and aging buildings. Those are my two major predictions for why we're going to see some softening in the C space. And therefore, I think as the lenders, double whammy, pull away from that particular business model, it's going to hyper exaggerate problems. That's where I think you're going to see a lot of creative financing in the C space in the 10 to 50, 60 unit size going forward.
There's a bonus tip for all our listeners about this market prediction, Bill, just to be quite honest about it. I want to go back to, I guess, the beginnings of the book, the reasons for writing it in regards to when you started out, let's say 15-ish years ago, and learned these techniques. Did you have a mentor that you cared to mention or not mention? You just ground it and found it on your own, as well as the market. You've learned all this stuff on your own as well.
Correct.
And do you have anything packed into the book about market cycles like you just talked about?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'll let you.
It is all in there. Yes. The three pillars of real estate are all in there. I do teach it in reference to using it for creative financing. I'm actually, spoiler alert, I'm about a little more than halfway through a second book. So that book will be coming out sometime in the next year or two. That one we'll go into a lot more detail about the use of those techniques. In the first book, it's about creative financing. So I show you, the applicable aspects for creative financing. But in the very beginning, now let me say, did I have mentors? Yes, I was calculating it up the other day between my failures that I learned from and paid education, 800 grand or so probably in my education.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, but yes, I have had mentors and I have paid for education. I've paid for coaching programs. I'm a big fan of getting a paid education and spending money on your education. You need to vet the coach. You need to pay attention to who you're giving money to. So I'm not saying just go get any old coach, but I am a big fan of that. The direct question, the creative stuff, nobody taught me I got out and was making it up just out of general survival. What I didn't realize is the stuff that I was kind of making up actually had names. So I was doing lease options before I actually knew that someone else had already called that a master lease option. I thought I'd made it up. And then somebody goes, oh yeah, it's called a lease option. So I was out there just kind of figuring it all out, because I had to, because I had no other choice. So that's how I created that first 400 unit portfolio. I'll tell you, I actually used to be embarrassed to talk about it. When I would go to seminars and things like that, I'd closed 100, 200 units. Sometimes with seller financing, sometimes I'd done, line of credit or a debt partner or seller finance, lease option, whatever the case. Anyway, I thought that was a poor person's way of doing business. Here I was, I had no money, I had no experience. I'm looking at all the people, I'm going to these seminars, and of course the guru would put their best students on the stage and say, oh, look at this student, and they just closed a million units and this kind of stuff. So those were my references, and I'm going, well, I must be stupid. Because I'm over here doing seller financing, I'm over here doing lease options, and here, everybody else seems to just go write a check, right? And that's what you do. You just walk into the bank and you get a loan and you write a check and you buy real estate. It's easy, but I'm over here doing these things. I must be doing something wrong. I was embarrassed to talk about it, because I felt like I was some kind of idiot doing some kind of backwater redneck real estate, and come to find out several hundred units, and somebody finally cornered me and was like, no, tell me how you did that. And I was finally like, okay, fine. I did seller financing. I did this, and I was in a seminar, and I look up and I probably got 40 people standing around me all taking notes. And that was my aha moment. They're like, wait a second. And I'm looking around, everybody's like leaning in and they're going, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I thought, oh, this is actually something people want to hear about. And then I realized that was, something interesting. And so I started sharing it ever since then. But yeah, I used to be embarrassed to talk about doing seller financing.
You think that goes back a little bit to the imposter syndrome that we sometimes talk about, afraid to share, thinking we're not good enough to talk about what we're doing or can't add value or whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just embarrassed, just shy, just swimming in a big pond, and I was a little fish and didn't know any better. And the problem, and this is what, after now I've been doing it for so long, and now I teach as well. What I always try and do is make everybody in the room realize they're probably more normal than they think. And I don't like that, because the way a lot of people do, a lot of the information gurus out there will grab their highest flying students, and they're always using those students as their example. And it gives you a poor perception of success, of business, and you just grab these highlights and you throw them up there. What that can do is it can make the rest of the student base feel stupid or feel like they're doing something wrong, or gosh, I looked at 100 deals and I didn't close one. And here this person is, they looked at 3 deals and they closed the deal and now they're rich. Like, whoa. That's not normal. That's some kind of crazy outlier. This guru grabbed this crazy special example and threw him up on stage, and everybody's trying to compare themselves to that. And I think it's a terrible mistake. Look, people are normal. It takes you lots of deals to find one. You're not going to get rich quickly. It's going to take you a little while. I've been broke. I've been poor. I've in the name of my own business, eaten ramen noodles. I've had my lights cut off, my power, water cut off early on in the business. Oh yeah, all of that stuff, and I've had credit card debt I couldn't pay. I've spent my last available $10,000 on a coaching program one time, So yeah, everybody thinks that you just kind of get into real estate or something and it's just a straight trajectory upwards, and that's just absolutely not true. It looks a lot more like this. It eventually goes up. There's a lot of ups.
You want to see a trend line, It's nice to have a trend line.
Sure.
In the right direction.
I think people get too expectant of success, and that's usually a guru's fault. So I'm pointing the finger at a lot of our educators out there. Be more honest about your business.
Yeah, this is not a linear business.
Not at all.
No,
for
not
sure.
at all.
Yeah, I appreciate that transparency, and I've had the privilege of being with you at several speaking events. And the one thing that I love about you is it's no BS, man. It's in your face, the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes back to just being vulnerable and authentic with people, and that's what attracts people to you. So
I appreciate it.
So talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, how long have you had this book in your mind and or on some form of paper, and what pushed you over the edge to finally get it done?
I actually wrote a lot of the material in about 2012, 2013. I was actually teaching for another guru who I won't mention, but and this is how I learned to hate a lot of the guru business and education. I was working for a guy who just was all about sales. And so I created this book. It was a home study course. And I thought, I'm going to go out and sell home study courses too. I'm going to stand on stage and tell everybody to run to the back of the room and take action and all this nonsense. And they're going to run to the back and man, they're going to get their credit cards out. This is going to be great. Yeah, that didn't happen. Total failure. I was horrible at sales. Great material, really, really bad at selling. So anyway, I kind of shelved that. And then of course the world got better and the real estate economy got better. And a lot of the information is kind of sat on the shelf. Fast forward to about a year ago, I guess, year and a half ago, I was at an event, Jake and Gino event, and Julia Barbaro, Gino's wife, we were talking and she said, you should write that down. And I went, okay. So I wrote a book. That's it. So now, being timely, I'm bringing the book out. But she suggested that I write it, and it was just kind of I just needed the little push over the cliff, and I thought, okay. So I drug out all the old material, sat down, remastered everything, rewrote it, brought it all together as a book, updated everything, added new material, put a cover on it, and now we have Creative Cash.
I want to make a point here for our listeners. There's no bones about it. Bill's just very honest about his struggles, his failures, but his journey. But he is very successful at what he's done and what he continues to do. And this story about Julia Barbaro helped pushing him over the edge is just another example of, I don't care how successful you are, how long you've been doing this, everyone needs a mentor. Everyone needs someone to push them. So never underestimate that. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely. She's actually on the first page. I gave her first mention in the book. Yeah, right. I said, really honestly, she has been a personal coach for me, personal mentor for me. And I recommend anybody looking for some personal help. She's a great person to talk to. But she gave me the ability to sit still, the accountability to sit still. I'm relatively hyper. And if she just didn't give me sort of that little bit of accountability, I just would have done it. That's all I needed. Yeah. This is a suggestion. And now we have a book. So.
Hey, it's Greg from Real Wealth Solutions. If you'd like to know more about our passive income opportunities, jump onto realwealth.solutions and hit that schedule a call button. We're always happy to talk about our multifamily and flip projects and to answer any questions you may have. Again, that's realwealth.solutions. We look forward to hearing from you. And now, back to the podcast. All right, so let's take something out of the book. So let's, you referenced the people in the 10 to 50 unit space. You referenced the people that don't have money or necessarily the net worth and liquidity. That's a big group of people, and you realize that there is, there's an audience for this stuff. So, say I'm looking at a 30 unit here, and I just can't seem to get the conventional side of the financing to look at. From your experience, what might be one or two of the creative things that you think most people just overlook that might be their next option to opportunity? And I realize there's not a lot of backstory about what's actually going on with the seller's needs and things like that, but a couple of things out of the toolbox. What would you suggest to look at next?
Yeah, first thing is I would identify why. Why is this property not work for you? So what's going on now? And then I'll bring up the most important number. It's one single number when we're dealing with a traditional lender, and debt service coverage ratio. That's the holy grail, and that's for your listeners. That's how much net operating income sort of equals the bank payment. If you have a 1-to-1 ratio, then your net operating income equals the bank payment. You're not making anything. Lender wants to see 1.2 or better. Fast forward, we've got COVID going on. If you're looking at some rent rolls these days, you're starting to see that economic occupancy fall, tenants not paying rent. So all you got to do is just sit down and calculate the debt service ratio. If it's at a 1.2 or less, the likelihood that you're going to get a loan, the likelihood that anyone is going to get a loan is low. So right there, what you can do, you got two options. You can bring the price down to get the 1.2 ratio, or you can bring the loan to value down. You can just borrow a lot less money. And what I'm finding these days is a lot of these properties are getting into the 50 to 60% loan to value range with their current income. Now that's not your fault. You didn't do that. You didn't make these tenants not pay the rent. You didn't manage that part. It's not your fault. And the seller's kind of looking at you going, yeah, but you need to write me a check and I need to be made whole. And as a matter of fact, it needs to be asking price plus $1. And then this needs to be completely your problem and your mortgage, and I'm going to get rich and get out of here. Yeah, I don't think so. And that's where I'm kind of saying going forward, this is where we're going to see a lot of this opportunity is in that space. So what I would recommend that you do, more to answer your question, is analyze the deal just like you were going to buy it from a bank. If you see that those numbers for whatever reason don't match, or you have to lower the loan to value too far, you go back to either the seller or the realtor, whoever you're working with, and you do what I call the ugly baby syndrome. All right, and people have heard me say this, but let me give you the rundown here. Everybody thinks their kid's cute, right? And I don't have children, but everybody thinks their children's cute. But there sure are some ugly people in the world. Somebody was wrong, right? So everybody kind of thinks their child is the cute. Someone was wrong. Well, what I have found in real estate is that all sellers believe that their asset is the greatest asset in the whole wide world, and they don't see the obvious problems, right? So it is your responsibility, your job, to educate this seller that they have an ugly baby without being too rude about it, right? So the key is you've now got to go back to the realtor or the seller and say, okay, I love you, love the property, you guys are great, everybody's awesome, except we got this little number problem over here. What do we do? What do I do? How do I solve this? And just kind of play stupid, really, and see if they'll make any kind of suggestion. If the realtor or the seller, whoever you're talking to, doesn't make a real great suggestion on how to close the deal, that's when you come back and say, well, clearly I can't go to the bank, ugly baby. All right, so and that's not my problem. That's anyone that walks in the door, because that's your property, not me. I'm great. I can borrow all the money in the world, but not on your asset. So you got a problem. Here's what I suggest. Now you come up with whatever that creative offer is. And see, that's kind of how you start this spy technique. You got to identify the problem. If the seller has no problem, or the seller is not aware of the problem, there is no problem. Creative financing is not likely to work, and you need to move on. So that's the key, is really sit down and pay attention to the seller, what the needs are, what's going on, what motivates them. And then your offer should sort of solve that problem, basically. That's roughly how you do it. In the spy technique, as I said, next, once you kind of figure out the seller's issue, look at the property. Okay, now does that same offer solve the property's problems? Okay, lastly, does it solve your problems? And that's how you analyze the deal and make an offer. Most people get that wrong. Most people sit down and say, what do I want? What's in it for me? What is this good for me? And then they look at the property and they say, oh, well, okay, maybe the property needs some work. And then lastly, as an afterthought, they kind of remember the seller. And they usually don't get creative financing accomplished like that. So that's my trick for you.
So, okay, we'll bring that example maybe just one step further. Let's identify the delta between me, the buyer, and we'll just call him Marvin. And Darren's going to laugh now. The seller.
All right, got it.
Completely made up person.
Sure.
Completely.
And you're looking at a property and you're like, yeah, for us to get conventional financing, this is going to have to come in at about $1 million. Marvin needs 1.2 on it. What is there something to price doesn't matter? And I don't mean that like in the very,
no, I understand exactly.
It's like, okay, how can I still give them something close to their strike price and have it be, fair exchange of value?
Right, absolutely. And you actually hit on one of the subchapters in the book, and it's give on price, take on terms. Most of the time in creative financing, we're going to be basically giving asking price or near abouts. Because that is typically what the seller is most focused on. They're a lot less focused on the way they get to that price. So in this particular scenario, I would have to ask Marvin, does Marvin have an underlying mortgage on the asset or not? If Marvin, the seller, has a primary loan, well, then Marvin can't really give interest he doesn't have. So he can't give you proper seller financing where you go down and record the deed and you're now the new owner and Marvin's the lender if Marvin has a loan in place. Not going to happen. We can do what we call a wrap or subject to. I don't like that kind of financing. I think that's a mistake. What I would suggest is that you do a master lease option in this type of scenario. And that's where you go in and rent the property from Marvin with the right to sublet the apartments, and you're going to negotiate a price between today and tomorrow that you get to purchase the asset. Now, the idea is that you're pretty much going to give Marvin the asking price, but you're going to structure the underlying loan in a way that allows you to go in and mitigate whatever the issues are on the property. So I'm assuming right now, if Marvin needs $1.2 million and you're saying, hey, it's only worth $1 million, I would ask the question, where did you get the valuation of 1 million? Is that a comparable sale number? Like just everybody else in the area paid $1 million and that's why you came up with that number? Or is this an income approach issue? Like, hey, $1.2 million, I go over to the bank and borrow that money. My cash flow is too low to be worth it, which is about 98% of the time we analyze a deal, right? It's the price is off. So if it's something like that, then you've got to come up with an underlying loan that helps you go in and bring the value up to 1.2 million. So now if you say, hey, the price is 1.2 million, he's at 98% occupancy, collecting all the rent's at market, you know, the property's doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's just overpriced. Just because you can do creative financing doesn't mean you should do creative financing. Don't assume someone else's problem, solve it. If you can't, if your solution doesn't fix things, you're just having someone scrape their shoe off on you. You're just assuming their issues. So just because you can do creative financing doesn't necessarily mean you should. You know, bad area, high crime, things like that. You just can't solve those problems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some things you just can do nothing about.
Correct.
You can't change the median income.
Correct. And that's what I'm saying. There are correct. Bingo. There are some areas, some properties, and some reasons we just need to stay away from altogether. And so that's why I kind of say, hey, look, creative financing just increases probability. That's all it is. Not possibility. It's possible to do anything. Is it probable? Well, if we're closing, and I always kind of, from my experience, I find that most of us close about 1 in 80 deals we analyze. Fine. So maybe with creative financing, we close 3 out of 80. 300% increase. Wonderful. There you go. That's what this is for. It's not the end all. It's not the only way. You know, it's a way. It's added tools. It's added ways to think creatively in a manner that you may not have before. Therefore, broadening the possibility of deals. That's what creative financing is for.
Yeah, because going back to that scenario, the way you kind of framed it with that master lease, it would therefore have some kind of value add component where you're able to increase the NOI, and then after the master lease, it's would you have the first right of refusal or the option or something is what it is?
It can be made either way. Yeah, first right of refusal would be on the lighter side.
Yeah.
I would prefer an exclusivity, but yes, the first right of refusal works as well.
I mean, it's similar in what it accomplishes as a bridge loan.
Correct.
You're able to get to a point where you can refi out to what may end up just being conventional financing
or exit in some manner.
Some kind of exit. Yeah.
Correct. Exactly. That's the point of all creative financing, is to take a problem, solve the problem, bring the value up to where it now qualifies for traditional lending, exit whatever creative structure you've gotten into with now maybe a sale or a refi or what have you into some sort of traditional stabilized loan, get the seller out. It's just you now. And that's a way that you can also, if you're lucky, you can build a portfolio without a lot of partners. You know, in a syndicated deal, a properly syndicated deal, which I've done lots of, you even as the main owner are usually one of the smallest equity shareholders in the deal. You know, your investors take a big chunk, and then if you've got sponsors, you know, someone brings the balance sheet, they take a big chunk, and you know, you do the heavy lift, but at the end of the day, you kind of wind up with a pretty small slice of the pie, a free slice, if you will. I mean, you're not really investing money in to get it, but you wind up with a lot of partners in that structure. Creative financing can actually help you eliminate partners, possibly getting into deals where you may have otherwise, if you went over to the bank, you would have needed all these financial partners. But through qualifying for the loan through seller financing, you eliminate the need. So it's a great way that you can build equity, build a portfolio without a lot of experience, without a lot of money. If you're new to the business, I'm not saying no money down. I'm not saying that. I hate no money down. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be a whole lot of money down, or it could be someone else's money in some cases. But yeah, it's a real good place to get started if you're new to the business.
I wasn't sure if Darren was going to jump in there.
Hey, that's a good pause, actually. So he meant that for me. So I didn't take advantage. Here we go. So back to not necessarily yourself, but now if we're going to take advantage of this technique, what are the angst that you really have to get over to when you throw this out to a seller? How I think some people just struggle with throwing that out there as an option, just like, well, they're going to think I'm crazy. Or we know with brokers, we definitely don't want to lead with creative financing, but if we're direct to seller, obviously, the opportunity increases.
Yeah, I mean, because what I'm looking forward to, Bill, is what you're doing is it goes back to like we talked about. It's like, how do I even ask for this? And I think I currently don't have enough knowledge about some of these options to confidently present them. So, I mean, you're solving a huge education side of it on the preparation level. Is like, you have to be able to ask for something that you can describe and articulate. And it's me personally, that's been part of my struggle is some of these things that I think might work. I haven't completely worked out all the nuts and bolts of them to be able to articulate them as an option. So I was just throwing that in. Is that part of that? What you're talking about, maybe the imposter syndrome thing, is having the knowledge in place. So that's where the book's coming in. I don't know if Bill froze there or if he is just being super stoic.
Yeah, see that.
All right, so reaching out to a seller or agent the first time is nerve-wracking for anybody, especially people that are new. And it's a great question about kind of how do you get over the fear, I guess, or nervousness about making that first creative offer? Well, step one is education. So again, selfless plug here, read the book. I mean, once you read the book, and I feel like once you have the techniques down, you understand the process, you understand how these systems work, you will be a lot more confident in making the offer. Reason being is because before you even make the offer, you're gonna have sat down, looked at the deal, analyzed the deal, created an offer. Now you know that offer is a problem-solving offer and it helps someone. I think right there, you're gonna be a lot more confident in making the offer. Now, how do you do it specifically? What I would do if you're working with a realtor, it's a little different, but if you're working with a realtor or a seller directly, we've gone through the discovery process. What's wrong with the seller? What's the issue? We know we've gotten over all that. Fine. How do I actually submit the offer? I would sit down and kind of get some buy-in. I would sit down and have these sellers sort of give you some ideas of what would solve their problems. And so you kind of get them in that back and forth dialogue of helping you craft the offer. If it's day of and you're really about to actually submit an offer, step one, use a letter of intent. So I would use an LOI, and that is, a one pager, just the high level points. And we have them available with the book. How use this form to create up an offer in writing that hits the major salient points, and then submit that to them. So that's what I would suggest you do, is use that letter of intent. I feel like education will make you a little more comfortable in doing it. You're solving problems. The one thing that I will do, and I'll go on and give you a piece of advice beyond the question you ask, what you should not do is make multiple offers. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, especially when they're starting out, really not even in creative financing, just in real estate in general. Hey, I got 3 offers. One's a cash offer, one's a bank offer, one's a seller financing offer. And here are all 3 offers, and you choose one. That's a terrible mistake. You should never make those offers like that, regardless of creative financing or just real estate in general. Several comments. You can create deal fatigue or decision fatigue. You can give people too many options, number one, and a confused mind usually says no. So you don't want to sit down and throw out a lot of choices for a seller. Number one. Number two, what if the seller looks at all three options and says, nah, go do better than that. Now you're negotiating against yourself. And so that's why I say sit down and create the best offer that solves the most amount of problems. That's the best offer for you. Make that offer. Stop. See how that goes. If they say no, then you come back and you come in with a second offer or an amended first offer, but never lay down multiple offers all at once. That's probably one of the worst things you can do.
Yeah, it sounds like this strategy is a lot more of a fishing expedition where you're,
Can be.
yeah, I would expect it to sometimes take significantly longer, and there may be a lot of touches where you're trying to get a little bit more information as to what am I trying to solve here from the seller's point of view. So that's great with the LOI. I mean, they're non-binding. You're starting a conversation. They might shut it down completely, and then then you can get on and work on the next project, or they can come back and you can see that door open a little bit and proceed.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned that it is a fishing expedition, and that is true. But in some cases, we can actually fish with dynamite. We can kind of cut the process and just blow the fish clean out the water to begin with. And the way that we're going to accelerate that process, not that anyone should be fishing with dynamite, mind you, but besides that comment in general, what we can do is we can, in the deal analysis, and I go through an entire chapter on deal analysis, we can go ahead and identify a lot of the problems the seller may have without actually ever having to even speak to the seller. What I have found in a lot of cases, the seller is actually not educated about their own problem. It's really up to you to sit down and decide what's wrong with the property. Well, you can do that through the analysis of the profit and loss. If I sit down and take your rent roll and your profit and loss statement and I analyze that deal and I know what I'm looking at, I can identify whether you have an operational problem or not. Maybe it's expenses are too high, maybe rent's too low, maybe it's different things. And so I go through an entire chapter teaching you how to look at the profit and loss and the rent roll so that you can accelerate that fishing process. You can go ahead and it's not about sitting down and just picking the seller's brain and hoping they tell you the truth. No, I can usually sit down and tell the seller what their problems are, whether they know it or not. And that's the key, is to be able to sit down and say, hey, here are your ugly babies. Here are your issues. Here's where you've gone wrong. Here are the problems. Here's how I can solve them. I'll give you a day to think about it because I got other people's problems I'm going to solve. So am I solving your problem or not? So it's really more about attitude, I believe, than anything. You need to know you're the solution. And if you've got the offer and you've got the education, you are the solution. If the seller doesn't see it, go on, do another one. You'll find one that does.
Mm-hmm. So the due diligence on the underwriting side, is there a different lens that you're looking at it when you're taking a creative cash, / financing solutions, or is it more of just because we're looking for those, the expenses are really high on payroll. We're looking for that for
Sure.
regular deals all the time, but you're
Sure.
just taking that information and presenting it to
Correct.
the person and saying, here's why I can't do it. I think this is what's going on, but here's how I can solve it and still get you your happy ending.
Correct.
Okay.
The key is whether the lenders will back up the model or not. So you guys are pretty well established. You're in the business. You've got a track record. It would be easier for you, in your experience, to walk into a traditional lender's office and say, yeah, but don't worry about that property and the numbers and the asset, because look at our track record. And that'll bring a lot of credibility and a lot of purchasing power, but not everybody has that ability. And so what I'm saying is, as the markets shift and lenders start pulling away from these assets that are, not destroyed assets, but they're right on the line of being, some distress to them, that's where you're going to see even, people like you will have trouble. Go take a property right now that's got a 1.1 debt service ratio to Fannie Mae. I don't care who you are, they're not going to fund it. I don't care how much money you got, they're not funding that. Okay, so the seller has a problem. So do you. You want to buy the property, and you can't go get this kind of loan, and the seller wants to sell. That's everybody's problem. It hasn't been everyone's problem over the last couple of years, but it's about to be, because we're seeing some of these COVID affected properties. The lenders are pulling back. That's where I think we're going to have a lot more of this going forward, and where it's going to be a lot more applicable to a lot of people. If you want to use bank loans, that is. Now, if you have all your own cash or something like that, fine. You'll be easy. But I always kind of make the joke, on the up cycle, when the markets are going up, everyone calls that property value add. When all of a sudden we go over the peak and we're going down the other side, all of a sudden it's called a distressed asset. That's the same property. It's the same amount of repairs. That's lender dialogue. Lenders will call that value add when they like the deals. And then when you start to hear distressed asset from the lender dialogue side, we've gone over the top, because that's how they'll use that verbiage to kind of start pulling away. So just watch the general verbiage in the lending world. And, generally speaking, are we hearing value add or are we hearing distressed asset? So the nomenclature tells you everything. And I'm predicting you're going to start hearing a lot more about distress than value going forward.
That's a great tip. I just learned that then, because as long as Greg and I have been investing, we've still been on the upswing or on the crest of the market. So that's definitely something to pay attention to.
Right. And that's kind of my point, is a lot of people have been in this business less than 10 years. If you've been in the business less than 10 years, you've probably only seen one very long and exaggerated market cycle. And you don't have a reference point for other market cycles. And it's kind of like, I feel like I keep telling everybody, I'm like the third little piggy going, hey man, the wolf is coming. Yeah. Everybody else is going, no, the sky's blue and everything's great. I'm going, no, I understand that. It doesn't mean he's not out there. It doesn't mean he's not coming at all because today's a good day, and then what happens usually is everybody winds up at my house going, damn, you were right. And I'm going, wow, I try to tell you, you can't start building your ark once it's raining. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Or it's the turkey problem, history repeats itself until the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, right. I don't remember that one. Yeah, exactly.
So from a team member type point of view, so these different strategies are a little more outside the box of what a lot of us do. Is there any, I'm getting into like the contract side of it or the lawyer side of it. Yep. Is there, what recommendations do you have for once it comes to implementing these things? Do you need anybody more specialized than you're already working with? And if so, who would those people?
Yeah, definitely an attorney out of the gate. And I really kind of repeat that several times throughout the work is, listen, don't go at this alone. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is trying to go out and copy and paste documents. Can you go out online and find a master lease option document? Yes. Can you go find a seller financing document? Yes. Contracts and all these different things. But the laws really change from state to state. And so you want to have an attorney that is in that state, do your work for you, number one. Number two, always use an attorney to do any kind of closing, whether it's a lease option or seller financing or something like that. And you think, well, we can reasonably avoid a closing. And hey, I don't have to pay an attorney because this is just the seller and I on the back of the car, and we can do this contract right here. Yeah, but you don't know if your interests are protected. If you don't have an attorney run background and title check and record the deed at the courthouse and all these different things that we want to have occur to protect your interests. And again, that's an entire chapter in the book. I go through that and how to use attorneys, what kind of attorneys, what does your due diligence look like? How do you do due diligence on a seller, on a property? I go through all that stuff. And so very much want to use attorneys. What kind of attorney? I like one that has some experience in lease options if you're using a lease option. Seller financing is a little bit easier. A lot of attorneys pretty skilled at that. Most attorneys will tell you they're good at anything. Love you guys, love my attorneys, just saying. So what I recommend is that you ask your attorney how many transactions have they closed using something of that nature. And you just want to try to find an attorney that has a little bit of experience with it. What I found is a confused mind says no, and a confused attorney just says, hey, you can't do it. So if you confuse your attorney, they're just going to default to, you can't do it. It's all illegal. Everything's illegal. Go home. And that's not true. So you really want to kind of find an attorney that has some experience, and not only education, but experience in using these types of transactions.
And I imagine there's some spillover into the CPA world as well, or yeah, bookkeeping for somebody. So maybe that would be something as you're starting to investigate some of these other strategies, is to start bringing it up with your current lawyer that you're using. Do you have experiences? So you may want to start building out some additional resources before you pull the trigger and realize that
Yep.
you're, you know.
But don't let team building get in the way of finding.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
I hate that. Yeah, I see people do that all.
I don't want to
the time.
don't throw a roadblock in front of yourself because you don't have
No,
99% of the process figured out.
exactly. Yeah, that's the old.
Because that's what these people do. That's their job.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what you're paying them to do. You just got to make sure
Exactly.
you have one that has the experience.
Exactly. Yeah, and I just find a lot of students when they're new to the business get nervous about a certain part of the business. Maybe it's deal analysis or talking to a broker or this, that, and the other. And they kind of push that part that makes them a little nervous off to the side and then wind up doing all these other things around it, giving themselves the sense of activity, but or accomplishment, but it's really just activity. And that's why I say activity does not necessarily equal accomplishment. So, you know, we're going to sit down and we're going to build a credibility book, and then we're going to build our team, and then we're going to contact. No, go look at a deal. Just go find a deal and analyze the deal. That's what you need to be doing right now.
Yeah, activity can be a form of procrastination.
Correct. Right. When you find a good deal, then let's worry about all this team building garbage. You know, it's look at deals and network. Those are the only few things you need to be doing right now.
Absolutely.
Looking at deals and network.
If you would, I believe before we started recording, you said that the book's already available via download, via PDF.
No, actually,
possibly.
it's not. I have a PDF copy I could send some people, but no, it's actually going to be available February 9th, 2021. Okay. Yeah, Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. And another selfless plug, we have creativeapartmentdeals.com. And I have a masterclass with Jake and Gino on creativeapartmentdeals.com. So you can get the book there. You can also get our masterclass, download that there. Everything you need is right there.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I think we're going to try to wrap up here, Greg, unless you have anything else. What does Bill Ham do on a daily basis, if anything, to stay motivated in business, personal life, development, mindset? Is there any one thing that you do that has been a difference maker with you?
Oh, anything, one thing I do or any one motivation? Okay. I thought you were asking me what my motivation was, because like food is a good motivation. Shelter is a good motivation.
Yeah, right.
Those are all real good motivations for me personally.
Yeah.
No, what do I do every day? It's a lifestyle. I'm at the point, and I want everyone to kind of understand that when you really get into real estate and you're really going to go out and do this for a living, it's a lifestyle. It's not a business. I might be having margaritas on Tuesday. I might be working on Saturday. So you have to just understand it's a complete lifestyle. So I just kind of work all the time. My personal routine is I like to read the Wall Street Journal, 2 cups of coffee in the Wall Street Journal every morning. So that's kind of a personal routine. Read and study. I recommend everybody listening, read and study. That's probably one of my biggest routines is I read very constantly and always studying, paying attention to the markets, news, media, trying to predict the upcoming trends. So yeah, probably what I do the most.
Yeah, I remember. So you and I've gotten to share some personal time the last couple of times we've been together, which has been awesome. And I remember the Wall Street Journal was one of those things.
Oh yeah.
I know number 2 is that, and this is a whole a different topic for another podcast and or show, whatever you want to call it. But you're not huge on goals, and as far as writing about, you know what I mean. And I don't want to get into that off a tangent, but you're big on execution. It's like a lot of this other stuff that comes along with it. Just go out and network and find deals. But execution.
Yeah, I don't like long-term goals. I like short-term goals, execution goals. I usually try to keep my goals limited between today and Friday.
And I get that. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. You're very successful in what you've been doing and continue to do. Now you've got a book. I think it's awesome. And
hope it helps everybody.
We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it. I mean, because it's great evergreen knowledge that I have found to be a little bit difficult to kind of get online. That it's just not. It seems to be very fragmented. I'm looking forward to like a little volume of like stuff. It's not going to answer every question. It sounds like you do a fantastic job of framing stuff out, but it can get you to, that top of that rabbit hole where you're like, oh, this solution might actually work for this situation. Let's try and implement it and see where it goes.
Yeah, there's surprisingly little information out there. And to your point, it's fractured, and you can find a piece here, an article there, somebody taught a class over here, but there's no real go-to place for it, and I'm hoping to sort of spearhead that. And maybe this book will lead the way on that. So we'll see in creativeapartmentdeals.com as well. But yeah, so hopefully this will help everybody keep the information in one place. But you're right, it's not much out there.
So this is coming out the 9th of
Yeah, the 9th.
February.
Correct.
Yeah, so this podcast may actually come out before then, but in any case, it's available for pre-order, right?
It is.
So, okay, no matter when you're hearing this, it's available or it's available for pre-order, and you can get in the queue, as our friends in England say. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. This is awesome. I'm looking forward to reading. I my reading tends to be not real estate. So probably it's like for every 5 books I read, one of them might be real estate. So this one's going to rise to the top of that short list.
Yeah, it's not too long, so it shouldn't take too long.
Sweet.
There you go.
Appreciate it. So, Bill, anything you want to add? Hey, if you want to get a hold of me, here's my TikTok handle.
Yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, it's bill@gobroadwell.com. That's my email, and it is broadwellpropertygroup.com. That's the website. You can reach out there if you want to do business with us, invest with us. I would suggest you reach out and go through our program. We've got a series of questions on Go Broadwell or broadwellpropertygroup.com. You can fill out your information there. We'll reach out to you. And again, if you have anything for me personally, it's bill@gobroadwell.com and creativeapartmentdeals.com. That's where the information and the masterclass is at.
Awesome. Thanks. And yeah, for Darren, we appreciate your time. We appreciate our listeners' time.
Yeah,
and, hopefully this resonates with you. And if there's somebody that you think would benefit from this episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them as well. So for the Real Wealth Solutions podcast, we're going to close it out. I am Greg Scully and
Darren Light. You can find us at realwealth.solutions.
Oh yeah. Thanks for throwing that in there.
Welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.